from Yes We Cannibal. Welcome to this week's edition of Beat.
And then we were like reading Cary more about your bio, and we're like, wait, you were at Evergreen in like '93, and then Cal Arts, and so got this much more like sort of interesting picture that we're really kind of curious about, you know, your influences and sort of what that trajectory was like. And especially then, I mentioned it in an email, but I saw that you did an adaptation of both a Michelle T book and a Kathy Acker book. Is that right?
Oh, yeah. The Michelle T book is called Valencia, and it's a different director directing each of the chapters with a different actor playing Michelle. Valencia is an autobiographical book. And yeah, so there's a different actor. And so everybody kind of worked autonomously on their chapter with a little bit of oversight, you know. And then the whole thing was produced by Michelle and Clement Goldberg.
Cool.
Who also did a chapter.
Yeah, I shot that chapter. Clement's. Yeah.
Cool. Cool, yeah. And so, and then the Kathy Acker adaptation, that's called Peace of Mind. And that project sort of came right out of Maggots and Men, and the two are connected because while like pretty early on in Maggots and Men, we teamed up with Flo McGarrel. We'd met in 2004, and then in 2005 in March we shot the first ocean scenes, and we did like hosted like a weekend at his parents' house in Vermont and filmed on the frozen lakes there. And so Flo was a really like amazing person. He was the art director. He had a background in sculpture, and and so him and I like kind of formed this like kind of partnership, and we got to be really close. We kind of came into the project with a lot of similar ideas about how to approach it. And so after Maggots and Men, he had gone to Haiti to work at a art center there, and he did a 3-month. He taught inflatable sculpture and did a 3-month residency at an art center. And at the same time, the director of the art center was stepping down, and he decided to apply for the position and did that for a couple years. And so he, living in Haiti, had the idea to do an adaptation of a Kathy Acker novel that's called Kathy Goes to Haiti. And so him and I were going to work on that project together. Like, I had this idea that I just wanted to form this kind of team with him. And so we just finished Maggots, and then it was kind of like, okay, well, let's make your project happen. And so we did a shoot that I think was a week or 10 days. And I'd gone down there in December, and for the month, and we'd kind of planned things out for the first few weeks, and then Zachary Drucker joined us, who played Kathy Acker, and we shot some scenes, and we really were just still in brainstorming mode about exactly how we were going to make that film happen. But then shortly after that, on January 10th, he died in the earthquake that happened.
God, that's terrible.
That's terrible.
Yeah. I mean, it was horrible, and it was he was such an amazing person, and such like it really pulled the rug out from under me in my life. Like, I had just really felt like I found like the missing piece to my kind of creative practice, you know, like with him as my art director, I really felt like I could do it, you know, like, yeah, let's make movies, and this is going to be great. And
it's
But yeah, and I mean, I think that like it was a big loss for a lot of people. Like he was just an amazing person and really like yeah. So anyway, just that's what that movie is a documentary that's about our friendship and what he was doing in Haiti and a little bit about his life. And so yeah, so that's what that document. That's what so it didn't end up being an adaptation of the Kathy Acker novel. What it is it's a film about a film that doesn't get made, and with a little bit of that initial footage that we shot. Yeah.
And I highly recommend it. It's incredible, and that like the footage, the film within the film is, you know, and the sort of behind the scenes with Flo, it's pretty beautiful and amazing, and yeah, that's all. Cool.
We will definitely watch it. Know about it, but it's funny because I sort of heard the story a little bit, right, in an interview you did for Javier's conference or the Kronstadt conference about the making of the film. And it was really exciting to listen to. Like, I love the images that it kind of produced of you guys kind of working on the fly in this collective way at the same time as you're like representing like this really military kind of discipline. Like, you're representing the military, but then living like anarchist squatters. And like, I just kind of love this sort of juxtaposition. But I sort of was hearing something sort of like kind of similar about the way you work, Carey, I think, in terms of collaboration and kind of like, I get the sense that do you work sort of, I don't want to say on the fly, but kind of improvisationally? Like, is that a big piece of how you think when you make film?
Yeah, I mean, I would say more so previously, and I'm sort of more so both. So I did a short before I made Maggots and Men, and both of those films were done like with a lot of emphasis on the experience of making the film and also figuring out what the film was as I went along, like starting shooting before the script is finished, and also with this idea of getting 3/4 of the way through the film and then reassessing, okay, well, where are we at and what's the film going to be now? And I think that like what are the missing pieces and how do we complete the project with what we have? And that was kind of my intention with Maggots and Men, and we're constantly like revising the script. Ilona and I wrote it. There was another scriptwriter that I worked with initially, and then Blake Nemec, and then Ilona and I kind of made the script that was what we're going to see visually and what the actors were saying while they were being filmed. And then there was another person that's Icky A, that is that wrote the text of the letters. And the letters weren't, that idea wasn't there initially.
Really?
And absolutely, yeah. And it became, I mean, it was such a process. It was really kind of nuts the way we went about it. Like, there was a lot of decisions that we put off, and like whether we were or not we were going to use the audio from when we were shooting. Wow. The people speaking, because sometimes we got more invested in the scenes, and sometimes the scenes really worked, like by hearing the spoken dialogue in English. But then sometimes they didn't work, and sometimes we were kind of moving to. Sometimes it seemed like, well, no, we don't want to use that, and then sometimes it felt like maybe we did, and we were going to like just record all of it for safety. But then sometimes we let that go as we were making decisions on getting through the day and so on. So some of the scenes like I think really worked, but some other of the scenes didn't. And also what was going on was my initial intention of how to approach the film. Like the initial ideas were that it was much more experimental and much less story. But what happened is as we got more and more into it, we got really invested in the history, and it became really important to tell sort of the story of what happened and do it like kind of in this like earnest approach of like, yeah, you want to.
Oh no, I'm laughing because I feel like we're, I mean, there are a lot of like meta levels to the process and the subject of the film and the film, the nature of this volatile medium and equipment we were using, some of which worked properly, some of which didn't, and but I feel like when we were, at the early stages, we were talking a lot. Obviously, the film is an homage to, in quotes, Eisenstein a lot, but we were sort of like, there was the conversation about these films without like one protagonist, of like Eisenstein's films where it's like the revolutionaries are the protagonists, versus like these other more conventional approaches, or approaches that center on a hero or heroes, and like, so it's like we were kind of playing these debates out while we were moving through the film in a way.
It's cool. That really comes across that there's this kind of it's almost like a kind of constantly shifting target of trying to identify the hero, if that makes sense. Like in some way, like where, but not quite. I mean, there's obviously something heroic, and there's sort of a good side, I suppose. But there's definitely, a shifting target. There's something really non-hierarchical, I guess, in the way the film unfolds that I think is really cool. So then when you talk about the process, like I think this film is historically important in so many ways, like even more so. And I know it's drawing attention, like with the crime think piece and all of that. But then when I listen to you talk about your process too, that also feels kind of historically interesting and important, like the way in which you're describing this experimentalism.
Well, I'm curious about the performance within a performance, because you mentioned that as part of what ended up working for you with the structure of your later movies. Is that part of all of your work, and was that something that you came to through this method of reassessing at three-quarter? Was that a device, or was that integral, or some combination of the two?
I'm not sure if you're referring to the Blue Blouse Theater, but absolutely. So the Blue Blouse Theater, so the theater and what we did was we shot the film. We had like 33 films left to shoot, but I was like, I have to start editing now, and I have to stop, because if I keep shooting, I'm gonna run out of steam, and I'm already out of money. And so let's just cut what we have and reassess. So then it was like months, maybe a year later, I had a rough cut. And then at that point, I realized, it's either needs to be really short, and it's just like this experimental visual thing. But if we want it to hold up and be like an hour long, then we need to have some story. And that was what I felt like it needed. And I also was so invested in the history. I was like, this story is important, and this history, because like it was just this imagination, and like pressing like fantasies on what an island of anarchist sailors could be like, and this kind of utopian thing. But then as I got deeper into the history, I got really invested in it, because the history was actually more interesting and more outrageous than my imaginings, And so the Blue Blouse, so then the letters are the kind of like maybe more poetic, and kind of what was going on in the mind, are imagining like the minds of the sailors. But then the Blue Blouse was this like kind of like, let's give you the dates and the facts and the context, so that we could put the letters relieve the letters from having to explain, and let them just be like the day-to-day, like not the emotions of, and kind of could be in this like area of being more poetic, and then but then have the facts kind of laid out for you, by the Blue Blouse Theater. But then also at the same time, we just wanted to recreate them, because they were so wildly exciting to us. And that was a real Agit-prop theater group. And a lot of the scenes, like the signs that they're holding up, or the anchor shape that they make, or the little fans that together make a circle, like all of that is just kind of like reverse engineered from actual photographs in that exact formation. Yeah, in that exact formation, and holding up those actual things. I'm tempted to grab a book off my shelf, but Lynn Malley wrote a Revolutionary Acts, and it's like there's all the photographs are there. But before we found that book, had found the photographs, and we were just completely obsessed with those. And also the Meyerhold biomechanical exercises. He was a theater director that was also like an acting teacher, and had this whole like kind of like approach to acting that had to do with total muscle control, and had all these poses, and then also had this like biomechanical exercise that was like kind of taking apart an action and breaking it into and that's what the boxers are doing, right? And so we were just obsessed with all these like wild photographs. We were just like, this was such an interesting time period, and like we just had to like cram it all into the movie.
How much did you know about Kronstadt before? I mean, how did you come across?
None. Oh, okay. So, I'd made a schoolboy movie. The starting place for the movie was take an all-male environment and then cast it with people with different genders and different bodies, and you're redefining male for the audience. Okay, right? So I did it with a schoolboy movie. And then I was like, okay, let's move on to our next all-male environment and do the exact same thing. So I was like, let's make a sailor movie, and then have it be trans guys, and like redefine male in the all-male sailor world or whatever. So that's the idea going into it. But the dilemma is I can't make a movie about like, I can't make a light, sexy movie about like current US military, you know? Because that's like this kind of grim, like sad documentary, you know, and it's like I couldn't make anything light and fun about it. Had to take place at a different time and a different place, because you can romanticize sailors if they're like far away. That was kind of my thinking. So I'm like, I need a story, and I was kind of hoping I would find a story rather than writing a story. I was just kind of trying to come up with my idea of how to make a sailor movie. And I told this to my friend, who was at the time, I was visiting her. She was squatting in London and part of this like anarchist like kind of community. And she's like, oh, I heard of this island of anarchist sailors. And that's kind of all I needed, you know? And I was like, amazing. And it was really all I needed. And I was just gonna like project I was like seeing the like I'm like, oh, picnicking and meetings, and no one's wearing any people. It's like shirtless men being nice to each other. You know what I mean? Like maybe it's a desert island and they're drinking out of coconuts. I don't know. Are they pirates? They must be pirates, you know? And so then I just Googled. So she didn't know, because she'd kind of heard about it from somebody talking about it and this, that. And so then eventually I like did a search for Island of Anarchist Sailors, and quite quickly the Kronstadt came up. And so then I started reading about it, and that's, so so that's the story. That's how it came about. And it was kind of like a little bit random, and definitely about like, it didn't come from like having this like being an authority about like Soviet history by any stretch of the imagination. You know, like I didn't even know about Battleship Potemkin going into it. You know, I hadn't been to film school, and I kind of like, of course I was interested in Russian history, I was interested in revolutionary history, and I like loved the idea of like doing a research project. Yeah.
I was just gonna add,
Yeah,
I love the way that you heard about the movie through like this like mythology and storytelling within this like anarchist punk squatter traditional circles. Like that in itself is really interesting to me. Carey and I connected in San Francisco Community College film classes, but we knew each other from circles, and I happened to be of the Soviet Jewish diaspora and a Russian speaker, and my grandma was, still alive when we were making that film. So I sort of had this like interesting, my own sort of like ways of getting information that may not have been historically accurate, but where my grandmother would like solicit would get sailor song lyrics from her like senior citizen day program in West Hollywood, or like things like that. Like she was born in 1917, and so of course she didn't remember Kronstadt, and if she did, it would be the Stalin era like film where the soldiers are the heroes, called We Are From Kronstadt, and which we've also watched because it's very visually, it's really cool. But by the end of the film, I would just stop talking about this in a second, but by the end of the film, like we'd roped my uncle into doing the translation back from English back into Russian, so it became like kind of this very beautiful, funny family affair. And my grandmother never saw the finished film. I was a little like, there was a few scenes where I was like, but I took her to Frameline. I took her to Outfest in LA to see the extended the short you made that. And I remember her comment was, "These sailors, they look like a bunch of sissies."
That's fantastic.
What did they think about you doing a film about Kronstadt, your extended family, your diasporic?
Like they got into it. They may not have whatever thoughts they had about the queerness of it. They kept to themselves. It's not like I'm come from the most progressive family, but the ones who knew about it, everybody except my grandma knew like everything about it, and they were like still, like it was wonderful, like my uncle translating and kind of going from Russian to English to Russian, and they all came except my grandma to the premiere at the Castro Theater, so that was cool.
That's amazing.
Is he the voice, or that's somebody else?
No, that's actually, I wanted to. Sorry, I'll let you. Do you want to talk about Ursula? Oh, just our friend who is native Russian speaker and immigrated with his mother in the 90s, like when he was 10, is the voice of the narrator, and he's also the performer in the Cary scene, and he's sort of reflecting this performer, this singer, impresario, cabaret performer named Vertinsky from the pre-revolutionary era, who actually who wore makeup, and he wasn't necessarily queer, but he was a dandy, and and at some point and Ursula went to Russia and Ukraine and shot some Super 8 film from moving trains, and
okay,
so yeah, that's a very important contributor. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, Ilona made a trip to Russia during that time, and also, so there were Super 8 cameras taken by Ursula and by Ilona on trips, and so that's where the Super 8 footage comes from
of Russia. But the really funny thing, so I shot in the Red Square, and so one is supposed to pay for a camera permit, and the guards were just like, thought my Super 8 camera was so unimpressive and silly, they just let me film with it.
Cool.
So we thought some of the footage was archival, but it's all shot by you and your friends.
Not a single frame in that movie is archival, and I'm very proud of that.
Yeah.
We were really going for that, and there are these funny scenes of the frozen ocean scenes that we were really trying to mimic, where they're running in the snow with those white capes on. But then at some point in the research, I realized that that archival stuff wasn't actually, it was actually a recreation. Do you remember this? It was like a recreation but anyway, we were mimicking this recreation of what that looked like. I don't remember who did it, but it was quite old and shot on film, but it had been reenacted some years later. Yeah.
Louisa Minkin and Frances Summers. You're saying this recreation of a recreation, and they were one of our meet meets.
Do you know Louisa Minkin? So she did this, like, you know, Cocoon, like that kind of critical theory. She did a mashup of Carly Rae Jepsen. What's the song called? Call Me Maybe. With like U.S. soldier Marines in Iraq, kind of it's a glitch thing back and forth.
But actually, it's the Miami Dolphins performing Carly Rae Jepsen,
you'd be into it.
And the Marines recreating the Miami Dolphins recreation of Carly Rae Jepsen.
But it glitches back and forth between the two. But so we did a meet with them, and they were just like the most mind-bogglingly, very complicated, abstract, like critical thinkers. So very cool. But I think you'd be into it. Did you come into this though, you know, sort of thinking of yourself as an anarchist? You know, were you sort of already vested in a serious way in anarchism? You know, or did that grow, emerge, deepen as you did the project?
Yeah. You know, I feel like, I mean, I definitely feel like there's maybe a bit of a rift between like my lifestyle and being an anarchist. Like, I think like I'm really inspired by anarchism and I'm inspired by communalism, but then I feel there's this separation between how I live, you know? And I was feeling like that at the time. Like I'd been involved, like, yeah, I had a lot of, I'd been involved in a lot of like anti-capitalist organizing. Like right prior to making the movie, I was involved with an activist group, and that was kind of like my, like, a lot of what I was doing with my time. And I'd also like, and these thoughts were always kind of like I think about I'd gone to a lot of like anarchist queer anarchist gatherings, right? And I noticed that there was this real difference between when I would meet. A lot of them were, I was going to European gatherings, and one thing that I noticed that was so different when I would talk to the European guys about like what their ideals were and like what their politics were, they always started the conversation with talking about where they lived. They'd be like, oh yeah, well, I live in this project and I do this thing, you know, and I live in this house where we have this and this and we do. And I noticed that was such a difference between like the way I lived my life. And so I guess what I'm saying is like, I mean, I live alone, you know, I'm really into the idea of communalism, and I'm into like communities that are based on mutual aid, and I think that's actually like how our society would function much better if we did things that were kind of need based, and we had and more emphasis on sharing rather than, you know, competition and so on. But yeah, so, but like, am I an anarchist? I don't know. I feel like that's not how I'm living my life right now. You know. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think I feel sort of similarly to what you say to that. You know, the other thing you mentioned that really hit a nerve with me was you talked about kind of discovering Kronstadt as a mythos, and then at some point realizing you connected to these are real people, it's a real history. And so somehow to me that really speaks to this moment where anyone who has an artistic praxis, right, or any kind of experimentalism, there's so much confrontation with history right now. You know, so here we are in Louisiana, the George Floyd uprisings last year, the fact that we're a mile from a plantation, you know, and it's sort of like, it's interesting because you're reminding me about something I've thought about a lot in terms of what does it mean to have a sense of like freedom and experimental praxis when history, you know what I mean, like the injustice of history has risen in a way that's really important. Do you see what I'm saying? That there's kind of like you know, you became more aware of these as real people in some way, or more aware of being true to the history. And I wonder if you can speak to that at all.
I mean, yeah, like I think I mean, that's definitely like something that we were absolutely confronted with as we were making this film. Because what I'm saying is like, as long as it has to be a story that's taking place in another time and another place. And then it's okay. We don't have to confront the problems of our present military. But when you get into the history and you realize that there are people and that were like really suffering, then maybe it's also not so cute to make a sexy, like, fun romp, which no, I don't think that that's what the film is, but we were confronted with that. Like, we were trying to make something that was like a sexy sailor movie is like the starting point. And so how do we address that people were, like living under really harsh conditions, and do you want to jump in?
Oh yeah, it was just like back to like they look like a bunch of sissies, from Nessie Dolgan, my grandmother. It's not just that she like was watching people that may not all look hyper masculine or like exist across a gender spectrum. Like there was that for sure, but it was also like somebody from who lived through World War II, lived through the 30s and the 20s, like not, it was like, well, everybody looks kind of well fed and like it's like I think it was that too, like actual history versus what we were doing.
Yeah,
I think about that
like
sometimes.
people were, food was an issue.
Yeah.
Like there was this whole like crisis happening with like war, communism, and like maybe the sailors were slightly more fortunate than other places because they were pretty organized with their gardens and so on. But there was a real like kind of problem with agricultural production and like a kind of a famine going on. And that was like, I don't know. So it was like we were dealing with this kind of heavy stuff, and how do we deal with it? I mean, and I don't know.
I think we dealt with it really just by embracing this hybridism, this layering and having multiple films within a film.
Yeah, and scapegoating. Well, I was just gonna say, and scapegoating Lenin and Trotsky.
Oh, that's a whole thing. Oh my goodness.
I mean, I think that's so important. Is like not letting anyone have just really holding them to task and not letting them have any voice at all, and just like it was their fucking fault.
But this is something I have to jump in on because this is very important. The original imagining of Trotsky and writing, made me concerned about 100 years of coding of Trotsky as like the bad Jew. Yeah. And so we kind of shifted it a little bit because I was aware of anti-Semitic tropes in Trotsky and history.
Yeah, I mean that's where it was amazing to be working with Ilona, because Ilona had much broader. I got super deep into Kronstadt, right? Mm-hmm. But what I didn't have was like a background in Russian literature or like general history or like, I was like pretty clueless in a lot of ways, right? Where Ilona like had these backgrounds, and
I wasn't a scholar, but I had my interest and I have family who were like, who were early party members and were like doing well as Jews until Stalin So, and I knew I've always been interested in those histories.
Yeah, and so as I'm getting into it, like I was reading into this, like I was definitely like taking on this, like Trotsky's the bad guy, Lenin is like maybe we're this daddy Lenin thing, but with like slightly more sympathetic, and but Ilona was like kind of pointed out how problematic that was, and it was because I was reading like anti-Semitic history.
But I think it's ambiguous because I'm not trying to argue that Trotsky's morally a better guy than Lenin. I was just concerned about like representation, things that's really, or how we approached it.
It is interesting Lenin is always resurgent. I mean, there's always much. There's to this day. I mean, there's so much sympathy for Lenin's writing. You know, in particular, like people still talk about him. There's sort of a new crop of very young, sort of Marxists who really adore Lenin. How would you place sort of this film? 2009, it was finished, right? So 12 years ago. So in terms of trans history or queer history, like, I mean, if you want to make a statement, I'm just sort of curious. I mean, in terms of like, where is it located? How do you see it being located in 20 years and understood? You know what I mean? Because it's so radical, right? It's something that's never been done, and then obviously we've lived through something remarkable and continue to. How would you wish or see it contributing? What's its place in that history, in that revolutionary history?
Right. Well, let's see. Well, something that I talk about in the writing, or the what I like to say kind of about what the project was, is that we're linking the gender revolution that was taking place, which with as at least I saw it, San Francisco being the epicenter, and linking that revolution to like like trans rights, linking that to like a broader movement for like social justice, right? And I think this is coming out of this like desire for me to see like a more like radical trans politics. I think that like back then, maybe it's more so different now, but back then it's like the big issue was trans in the military. And for me, I think that's really offensive to have that conversation out of context. I think you can only talk about, for me, to take it out of a context of a larger discussion about like how problematic our military is and how it's just like offensive to me. Like, I think the conversation should be about like, I mean, if we want to make lives better for trans people, then we can take the money out of the military and put it into education and health services, which would help trans people, and it would take like the trans people who are most at risk and put them in a much better situation. And I feel like, so I guess what I'm saying is like trans politics, for me, like leaves a lot to be desired at that time. And so I think that, so that's one thing, is like kind of how I was like positioning like the kind of like the broader big, maybe like the broader big picture of like what's going on here kind of thing. But then also I think it's really important to talk about it. Like, I noticed that you had like quoted like some writing about it that's like from an old, when you sent me the questions, like you're quoting kind of like the gender anarchy, which is from a description. Did you put, anyway, so it's like, so the word gender anarchy, it's like that came from like a film festival that put that on their description of the film, and I thought that was really cute, and I like used it for a while. That's it. And so it's like some places like when it's in the description of what it is, right? But I think this is conversations that were happening at the time. And I think a really important thing to note is that so the starting place is this experiment where you take an all male environment and redefine male. But something that's all male is like the opposite of gender anarchy, because it's like in multiple ways. It's like one is like it's supporting the binary instead of destroying the binary, right? And it's also excluding women, which is also problematic. And I think what I was doing, I'm not trying to say it was, I guess what I'm trying to say is these were the conversations that we were having at the time. And that's part of why we were doing, it was an ongoing conversation about transness and passing and how like how we were playing out certain things with our casting decisions. And are like, I don't know, like a hierarchy of like, you know, like we have two tall guys, you know, the hierarchy of body type. Like, how are we like sort of promoting this kind of like body fascism with our like propaganda movie, you know? And so these were all conversations that we were having at the time. And I think that like, do you want to jump in, and or should I keep going?
Yeah, keep going.
Oh, yeah, I was just gonna say these are all like conversations that we were having at the time, and like, so when we're talking about like, because you're talking about contextualizing us on like a timeline, right? And I think that what I was seeing was that I was seeing like this kind of clash of like old and new, or like one, like Flo and I, for example, really clashed in a lot of ways personally. Like I was someone who identified as an FDM. I had transitioned from being female to being male, you know, and was interested in passing. And sometimes I would feel myself like sounding really like an old fuddy duddy, like, or no, like out of date. And like, because Flo was this like trans, gender fluid. I'm gonna insist that you call me he, but I'm gonna wear like women shoes and lipstick occasionally, and I'm gonna dress however I want. And we would have these conversations, and there was just this clash, because like, for example, with like Flo would say like, well, just because I'm decided to transition doesn't mean I need to buy new clothes. I would say, well, okay, you don't need to buy new clothes, but like, if you're trying to pass, like, people are looking to clothes as clues, and like, if you really want to pass, then you can meet them halfway and you can like give them clues. Flo would just be like, no, I want to dress how I want to dress. And I would end up saying the stuff that I would end up saying, like, it's like it would make sense to me, but that I would end up feeling really problematic, because it's like, it is true, you should be able to dress however you want to dress. And I think the difference was that Flo enjoyed dialogue and enjoyed like challenging people, and I liked to be left alone. And I didn't want to engage in conversation. I didn't want people to ask me how I identified. I wanted to just like not be asked any questions. Where Flo wanted to engage with people and wanted to fuck with them and wanted to challenge their thinking and wanted to like maybe move the world forward, or maybe just have fun with like ruffling people's feathers, and or just like to express himself, and was like deeply honest at all times. But I just felt like it was this kind of like, where I would see, I don't know, it just I associate that with kind of being like the wave of the future or something like that, you know, with gender doesn't matter, gender fluidity.
Well, it's interesting to hear you say that when probably the most famous trans person today is Kylie Jenner, right? So this kind of Caitlyn Jenner. Sorry, this right. But you know, this pop star, right? This confection in a way, which, you know, seems like on the exact opposite of your Kronstadt film. So I think that
in more ways, I mean, or politics alone.
Right, and like, so here's someone who really is like all about the performance of you know, success, of pop stardom, of all of these things. So it's interesting to hear yourself talk about
and extreme wealth, because when you point out the idea of buying new clothes, I never thought about that. That's so powerful. To think about that almost later.
Yeah. Right, and Flo was saying that, because he's like, I don't want to buy things, and I was like, of course you don't. And you know, like, we were both like kind of committed to like, you know, we're like digging through dumpsters and getting building materials off of Craigslist, and like getting the free box hookups at the health food store. You know what I mean? Like, we are in this culture of like, let's not buy stuff if we don't have to. And I would just feel like Flo was just like a step ahead of me and just didn't give a fuck. And I felt like but I don't know. I mean, I think it's also like the dilemma I mean, it's like the trans, like F to M dilemma, where you're simultaneously committed to, like, you see that, like, the binary gender construct is not really helpful or healthy or necessary, and lots of people are outside of it, and you see that it's, but then you have a simultaneous investment in it, because, like, maybe, like, at least for me, that's my experience, because there was time when I didn't pass, and I did things to change that, what, take my earrings out, like, dress differently, or, like, whatever it was. Like, there's different things that people do, and I think that I don't know, I just see, like, that being, like, a little bit of yeah, the dilemma, like, being invested in it, but also, like, seeing that this is problematic.
We actually have these.
Cabaret thing.
Oh yeah.
Oh, sorry.
But... No, go ahead, Ilona, please.
Oh well, I call the filming of the cabaret scene like the revenge of the femmes, like the uprising of the femmes of Maggots and Men, because we have these, like, wonderful women and, like, very, like, creative, performative artists and femme identifying who, like, who really got to shine in the cabaret scene, and they spent, like, days making costumes, shaving their eyebrows, doing crazy makeup. And the funny thing about all of this in our filmmaking practice is that the AD was our lead actor, Stormy Daniels, who Petrichenko.
Stormy Daniels.
I'm sorry.
Stormy Night.
My fuck, dude. I'm sorry. Stormy Night. My brain.
Stormy Daniels.
That Kylie Jenner.
Kylie Jenner. Yeah, exactly.
Stormy Night. Oh my goodness. There's a whole other universe happening right now.
No, it's great. It's great.
Okay, I'm gonna get it together. Keep going.
Stormy wasn't in that scene, and so he was the AD that day and was trying to hear you.
Yeah, so he was trying to like corral the women of the scene who are in the scene, who are dancing, and, like, and they were not listening to him because they were not ready. They were still, like, doing their makeup and whatnot. And I remember there was the one day Stormy AD'd, and just him running out and being like, I can't do this. They're not listening to me. Like, just totally, like, overwhelmed. So I call that the revenge of the femmes of Maggots, and they were, and it was incredible. It's like, that scene is so close to my heart and so beautiful.
Yeah.
It feels like a party. Like, the way you guys talk about making this film has the feeling of this extended, complicated party. Does it have that feeling, sort of, or?
You mean,
obviously a lot of work and grappling went into it, but it feels like a wonderful party.
You mean, like, yeah, and that's part of, like, the emphasis being on the experience. We were trying to make it fun, and it did get quite crazy. It did get quite crazy and a little bit out of hand, and then just kind of, like, evolved into the after party, Yeah, like, things got a little bit out of hand, I think, and it's funny that I'm still friends with everybody and love them dearly and don't want to, like, I want to tell this right, but there was a person that was, like, had to be asked to leave, and I learned later that she was, like, had been awake making the costumes and had, like, not slept for 3 days, but then was, like, drinking and, like, and whatever. But it was like, but I kind of, it was really outrageous, and it did turn into, like, this out-of-hand party. And that was an aspect of the scene, and not to, like, and I think that aspect of it, not to, like, bring up that this kind of incident happened, that, but, like, it just was, like, this kind of proof, or something that like, yeah, it was actually it did get out of hand, and it was like a wild party.
But it was like, yeah, it was a really sexy time. We're all most of us were in our 20s, you know, and like it's utopic, it's fun, it's hot. And then the cabaret scene, like that was when I was talking about Revenge of the Femmes, it wasn't just that they like were gonna like set things on their own time frame in their own terms, but there was a lot of like creative input that I think that was the scene where like people where there, maybe there was less concern about historical accuracy, but they're like where there was like a lot of like intense creative collaboration and cross collaboration. And I also thought that was interesting. And today we were trying to figure out that the person we're referring to made the headdress for the bartender, which at the time we were like, this doesn't look anything like the period or what's going on. But like I in this like oral history and recounting of Maggots and Men, my friend Teresa, who made the headdress, told me, well, like that she got a photo from Flo, and she made it from a photo. So we're like trying to figure out where it came from. Where was this sort of like folkloric sci-fi, like like influence? And I finally decided that it had to be from possibly Sergei Parjanov's Shadows of the Forgotten Ancestors, if you know him.
No.
He's well, go check him out. He's an amazing our Soviet Georgian Armenian filmmaker who like made mythopoetic folkloric films. He was gay, like really homoerotic, really wild, maybe like a little bit, not that I don't know if they even knew about each other, but like there's a little bit of a feeling of Jodorowsky. And we're just, but check him out. Amazing. And he wasn't I think we all watched this film. We're like, well, this isn't from the 20s, but like, he's my lodestar, so I'm happy he made it in. I decided it's Parjanov, and he had to be there somehow.
What do you think Tarkovsky would have thought of this?
Oh God, Tarkovsky is like a nationalist, like religious person.
Oh, yeah.
He's probably really conservative. He's probably like Mishima or something like. And he was also possibly queer. So he might have enjoyed the homoeroticism. That gets
but he might have,
yeah.
But we could probably talk together. Go ahead.
He might have thought it was a little messy.
For hours, and I don't want to keep you. I'm just curious what you studied at Cal Arts, Carey, and then I'm just sort of curious about what you guys are both working on and the future of Last and all of that, and whatever you thinking more. What did you study at Cal Arts? I'm wondering. Did you study film?
Yeah, film video. And the way my story works is after making Maggots and Men, that's when I went to school. I kind of was like, didn't know what to do next. And I was like, ooh, I should go to school. And it was like a way for me to find another, like I had kind of worked on the side and done film for my short and then for Maggots. And I wanted to move my filmmaking practice to the center. I felt ready to do that. And and I also was it was time for me to come up with another model of filmmaking, right? Like I had worked like kind of roping people that I knew into working for free. And I was like, I can never do that again because I've used up all my favorites and it's time, and so I was like, well, I can go to school and I can so at least for that time, I'll make another film and I'll be covered because, in school you work on each other's films and you have and you have access to equipment. And I was like, that's what I'll do. And then I thought that I was going to do something scripted, but that was right when Flo passed away. And so so I ended up doing at CalArts, I ended up making Peace of Mind, because that happened right at the beginning, and I was gonna make a film in addition to that. That was kind of more like Flo's baby. And yeah, but I ended up like doing Peace of Mind, which kind of put me on to more of a documentary path, because then I did a documentary short after that, and now I'm working on a documentary feature. And yeah.
What is the feature? Are you working together on it, or?
So what's your guys'
Sorry?
history?
Are you working together on the feature?
No, we mostly like work separately. We're very good friends, and we come back together for Maggots events. And,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you have collaborated on the second film, right? That you did, Carey?
No.
Oh, you were working for another.
Ilona worked a bit on Peace of Mind.
Yeah, I did some camera on Peace of Mind, but I wasn't a main collaborator. But I'm very grateful. It opened up like other like doors and experiences and films for me. And
what's the feature documentary on?
Oh, so there's a woman, a trans woman that lives in Chicago, that's a plaintiff on a lawsuit sorry, I should start the story. I made a short that was about a trans woman that lives in a black trans woman that lives in Chicago, and she was kind of getting on her feet after incarceration. So now she's part of a lawsuit, and that lawsuit has 8 transgender plaintiffs that are suing the state of Illinois to try to eliminate a law that bans felons, people with felony convictions, from changing their names. And so it's definitely going to be about this woman. Her name's Isha Love, and I'm in the process of expanding the documentary to cover other trans plaintiffs that are involved in this issue. And so and that's what it's about. And who the other people are, I'm still working on that, and kind of in development. But it's focused around this lawsuit, and also a bill that does the same, that eliminates the same law. And I have a ChicagoLoveDoc.com.
Okay.
That's where people can get info about it. Yeah.
There's an Indiegogo campaign going on right now.
I'm doing an Indiegogo campaign right now, and so it's called Chicago Love Doc, and you can find it there.
Cool.
You can also just go to the website, check it out.
Okay.
It's linked.
And Ilona, what's the genesis of Last? Or
the so briefly, after Maggots, I made some more short films, like more experimental short films I worked on. I collaborated on an experimental film in Haiti that like has sort of existed in parts in galleries, and you can see a trailer on my Vimeo, but I'm not sure if it's gonna see what its future is gonna be, but it's called Kingdom of Rhythms, and I worked on that with someone I met while working on Carey's film, a Haitian artist and actor and writer named James Sinsiliona. So that, and then I've with Last, my partner Andrew Wingler and I don't know, I've been influenced by alternative like video experimental film spaces like ATA in San Francisco, which is where I lived, where I met Carey, where I made Maggots, but like, and Andrew ran an art space out of his studio in San Francisco until he had to move because of all the crazy vulture capitalism and gentrification and evictions. But so I ended up in LA taking care of my grandmother until she passed away, and he and I just opened a space in Hollywood and I'm not really sure how it happened, but it happened. But so for the next 5-6 years, I was mostly, running a space, curating. Andrew still was commuting from San Francisco, where he kept his job at the natural food store collective Rainbow, where we got our food from Maggots and Men, the other projects. Yeah, so it all kind of happened organically, and then last year, so COVID happened, and then I found out I had cancer. So I've mostly been dealing with that, and it was a good year to, it was an easy year to take off, because like, who would even notice? But now, and I'm in a better place with my sort of done with active treatments, and things went pretty well. But having taken, and so we're gonna start off last, but meanwhile, I started like my own musical performance art practice, making videos with Andrew of mostly Soviet bard music, in this sort of very tongue-in-cheek way. So I'm still sort of leaning into Soviet history, but I also I never did this before, but at the age of 44, I started singing and playing guitar.
Right on.
I love it. It's really good.
Yeah, I would love that. That's
cool. You guys.
So I want space. So I just know that I want space and time in my life to do that, to like make things and make movies with my partner. And I also, we're gonna see what form. Last is coming back, but it's evolving. We're seeing what form.
Did you put your video? Oh, sorry.
Yes. There's so this all started because of one of the artists we work with, Liz Walsh. She had the last show when the lockdown happened, and kind of nobody saw it, and so she also kind of being inspired by public access television and experimental television, was started doing this Supermoon broadcast, and you can look up Liz Walsh Supermoon. It has its own channel. And so I collaborated with her on that, and that's when I started making these like little videos, because I did not have the attention span to work on any of my big unfinished projects. So yeah, I love it. I want to keep going.
Yeah. What's the music project called?
Is there a name for it?
My music project doesn't have a name. I've just been making like videos I'm just performing like these 60s Soviet bards, like singer-songwriters.
But can people watch? It's on Vimeo, or it's on YouTube?
It's on my Vimeo channel, Ilona Berger.
We'll dig in. We'll find it.
Yeah.
But I the same.
And Supermoon has its own channel, and it on Last as well. So
on Vimeo.
Yeah, so Last has its own. So look it up on the Last YouTube channel or on Ilona Berger.
When did Last start? Last started.
We started like in 2014, so we had a pretty good run in Hollywood, and then in 2017 we moved to Lincoln Heights, and we still, like I said, we still have the space, and that's why I'm here this week.
I left LA in 2015. And when I was looking at the Last site, it felt so good because it reminded me of kind of what LA used to feel more like the kind of spaces that are gone. So it was kind of like just like a heartwarming thing to see, like, okay, cool, people are still doing crazy shit a little bit, it's still out there, but things I think have changed a bit. So yeah, right on.
That's who we are. That's like where we come from, and there was this weird magic with Hollywood, because I think right before we left, and I saw Kenneth Anger, the filmmaker, on the street. Do you know him?
I've seen him on the street too. I was like starstruck.
Yeah, and he came up, and it was really beautiful because he's been such an inspiration. He's such a occult, queer, beautiful color film history. So there's very cool.
We should probably say thank you, and it's been an hour.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, really.
It's a pleasure chatting.
Just thank you for making it. It really means a lot. It's such an important film. It's beautiful. We love it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.